Hello and welcome to the second episode in this series about multi-platform modding in Minecraft with the Architectury API. And today we're going to add an item to the game. Now, to add an item to the game requires multiple steps. The first one is to register the item with the mod loaders, which we'll be doing through Architectury so that we don't have to write any Fabric or NeoForge specific code. And after we've registered the item with the mod loaders, we add the model information, the language information, and the textures so that Minecraft knows how to show us the item in game. Let's start with registering our item. And for this, we're going to create first a new package so that everything item related is in one place. And we also create a new class which contains our tutorial mod items. As you can also see, I've created a Git repository, so you can find the code I'm working on here in a GitHub repository linked below if you want to check that out. Now, the first thing we're going to need in this items class is a deferred register. This is the code we need for this. Let's import all the required parts, and then I'm going to explain this. Now, a deferred register is essentially a holder in which we place the registrations for our items, and then after all our items are inside of this deferred register, we register them all in one go. And the deferred register makes sure that our items are only registered at a point where the game is able to handle that information so that we don't have to worry about our items being registered too early or too late. Now, what this line does, we first define a deferred register and call it items. And we simply create this deferred register for our mod, which is this part here. We put in our mod ID from the other class, and we say that it is that it belongs to the registry type of item. This is this registries.item at the end. We're going to add a Ruby item in this video. So let's define our Ruby item, and we could define it like this, put an item here, but we're not going to do this. Instead, we're going to put in a registry supplier of item. And this has, again, to do with the, let's spell it correctly. And this, again, has to do with the deferred registering stuff, so that we have a variable where our item is stored before we actually are able to access the item itself. And using this registry supplier makes sure that we don't get any errors before the game has actually initialized the item. But it's still pretty easy to access the item later because this registry supplier simply has a get method for the item, so we can get easily at the item itself later on. Next, we're going to create an init function, which we can call later from our main mod class. And this init function, init method will contain all the code that is required for our item to be registered in the game. But before that, we're going to add two helper methods, because the lines would get pretty long if we wouldn't add them. I've prepared them, and I'm going to explain them shortly. So let's first import all the missing pieces. Make sure to import the correct classes. For example, for a supplier, there are multiple versions. You want the Java default supplier for this. Now, the first function is the register item function, and this is going to actually put the item we add into our deferred register we defined above. We're simply registering to our deferred register, and we need two information. The first one is the resource location where all the stuff related to our item is stored, and which defines the namespace our item is in. For this, we'll use resource location dot from namespace and path, and the namespace is our mod ID, and the path is the item name itself, which we get as a parameter in this register item method. And the second thing is a supplier that supplies us an item. Important is that we use a supplier here and not simply put the item itself, because we can't initialize the item before the game has actually done registering everything. And at this point, when this method will be called, this has not happened yet. And the supplier allows us to write the code that does initialize the item without actually calling it, because that is then handled by the deferred register at the time when it's appropriate to do so. The second helper method I've defined is a helper method that gives us a basic item properties. This essentially is item metadata that contains information like creative tabs, etc. And this simply creates a basic item properties and sets the ID, because this is something that was not required in earlier versions but is required since 121. We need to set the resource ID we defined above here again, but in this case as a resource key, which is specific to the item registry, which we also put in to our default register above. Now with these two helper methods out of the way, it's time to actually initialize our item. And for this we simply call our register item method. And first we put in a name, in our case Ruby. And next we put in our supplier, and we're going to use the lambda notation for this. So simply brackets with nothing in between, and then this arrow, and then we can write, and then we create a new item. And this item now requires as a parameter our item properties, and for this we simply call our base properties function method we defined below, and put again the name in here, which is Ruby. But now we also want our item to be accessible in game easily, and for this we will add it to a creative tab. And for this we simply go onto this item properties, and now Architecture provides us with this arc$tab method, which is a wrapped method which then uses the mod loader specific functions behind the scenes without us actually needing to write them out individually. And in this method we simply select our creative tab, and those are in creative mode tabs dot, and then we can select one, in our case an ingredient for example. And then we simply end this line, and now we have our item registered in the game. Not yet though, because we right now only have it in the default register. But to actually tell the game that the item should appear later, we need to call the register method on the default register we defined above. And with that, we essentially have added an item. So right now, if we would launch the game, we would see the item in the ingredients creative mode tab, but the item will neither have a name nor would have any model or texture information. So let's change this, and let's start with language information. And for this, we're going to create a new folder in the resources directory. And this folder is called assets, then our mod ID, in our case tutorial_mod, and then lang. And in this folder, we can place all the language files. So if we want to add multiple different languages, we would create one language file for each language. In our case, we just want one language, so we create a new file and call it en_us.json. And this will contain all language information for American English, which is also used if no other language file is available for the selected language in the game. And in here, we now put in our definition for the item. Simply put in this those curly brackets, and then write item.tutorialmod.ruby, and then the name behind this. So first item, then a dot, and then our mod ID, again a dot, and then Ruby is what we've defined here as the item name in our init method for the items. So this Ruby is the same as this Ruby, and down back here you can write essentially anything. This is just the name that will appear in game. Now the item would have a name in game, but still no texture or model information. And before we can add those, we first need to tell Minecraft where to actually find those information. And for this, again, we create a new folder. And again, assets, and then our mod ID, and then items, plural, items, will be important later. And in this items folder, we'll now create a file with our item name, in our case ruby.json. Now in this ruby.json file, we are going to tell Minecraft where our information will reside, and this is the corresponding block. So we define that this item has a model, and the type of this model is a Minecraft model, simple as that. And then we define where our model is actually located, and in this case it will be tutorial mod and then item/ruby. Again, a mod ID at the beginning, and then Ruby or item name at the back. And this says the game that in our tutorial mod assets folder there is the definition how our item should be rendered. So let's create that definition, and for this, in our assets tutorial mod folder, or in your case assets mod ID folder, we're going to create a models folder. And inside of this model folder, we create an item folder. Important here, singular, not items as before, but now it's item. Don't know why, Minecraft decided to do it that way. And in this folder, we're going to create another file and also call it ruby.json. And this file contains the following. First, we define. So in this file, we define first the parent of our model, which is the default Minecraft item model. There are other item models in Minecraft, for example, for handheld items like tools. And then beneath that, we define the textures. Now we have only one texture layer, layer 0, and this is our mod ID again, and then item/ruby. Again, behind the part in the back here is our item name, and in the front we have our mod ID. And this file now tells the game which model to use and which texture to use. But again, this texture does not exist yet, so let's add the texture in the next step. And for this, we're going again in the assets tutorial mod folder, or in your case assets mod ID folder, we're going to create a directory for textures, and again item singular. And in this directory, we can now place a texture, which I've already prepared. So let's move it in. I've simply recolored the diamond texture to this beautiful red. Yeah, and now we have a Ruby texture in our textures folder. And with that, everything should be set. So let's launch the game and see how it looks in game. Yeah, as you can see, I've just started the game and noticed that the item was not showing up. And the reason for this is that I forgot one simple line, and this is to actually register items, because I forgot that we need to initialize our items. And for that, we simply call in our main initialization method in the mod file, the root mod file in our common project, tutorial mod items.init, the method we defined here. I forgot to call that, so that's why the item didn't show up. But now that I've added it, let's start the game again and find out if it works now. Alright, welcome to the game. Let's check if everything worked. So let's open the creative inventory, and then in the ingredients tab, if we scroll down to the bottom, we see our wonderful Ruby item. It has the red texture, it is in the red creative mode tab, and if we press F5, we can also see that it has the correct item model. It also has the correct name, so that indicates that the item has been successfully added and we have a custom item in the game. This is the fabric instance of the game, as you can see in the title screen down here. So let's check if that also worked with Neoforge. Simply close the game and then select the Neoforge project up here. And let's see if it works. So now welcome to Neoforge. Let's check if it works as well. Ingredients, scroll down to the bottom, and as you can see, our Ruby is appearing in the creative mode tab, has the correct name, and also has the correct model and texture. Yeah, so with that, I've shown you how to add a custom item using the Architecture API. In the next episode, we'll be talking about the item's bigger cousin, a block. See you then. Goodbye.